Hello everyone, my name is Ansh, I'm 13 years old, and today we'll continue learning about supply and demand and the market equilibrium. So, if you haven't seen it already, my first video was part 1, demand, law of demand. And this is a follow-on part 2 from that video. So we've so far looked at demand and now we're going to look at supply. And we're just going to recap. I've already said this in the last video, but why would you even learn supply and demand? What benefits will you get from this video? So you can better judge a fair price, and this is good for both businesses and for customers. As a customer, you can judge if you're getting a good value for your money, and as a business, you can set prices fairly and right so that more people will buy your product. And secondly, scarcity. So there's scarcity of many resources in this world, and you can see how that looks on the graph, e.g. fossil fuels. Same example I mentioned last video. So now we're going to look at the law of supply. And the law of supply states that as the price of a product or a good increases, the quantity supplied of that product, so how much people supply, also increases. And vice versa, as the price of a product decreases, the quantity supplied decreases. And we can look at this in a supply schedule, which is essentially a table that shows us a scenario, the price and the quantity of a product. So we can observe the relationship between the numbers and also plot these in a graph. So price, quantity, and we can look at the example of oil. Let's say oil production. Oil. So scenario A, B, C, D, E, and F. And say here you're willing to produce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the liters you're willing to produce, liters, and this is the price per liter. So here we can say you can put this in, perhaps if you're a big company, thousands, let's say. So here it could be 50p, 80p, £1.10, £1.45, 190, and 250. And these are, I don't know the exact price for a litre of oil, but these seem to be fairly reasonable amounts. And we can just observe the relationship right now of, as the price is increasing, as you're getting paid more and more, you're now supplying more and more. And this makes sense, because if you're getting more money for it, then why not devote more of your time and energy to actually producing these? You will make more money. So I just want to really make you understand in more detail why, as the price increases, the quantity supplied increases. So I'm going to take the example of a farmer who can either farm rice or wheat and has a set amount of land. So let's say right now he's getting paid equal, so it's half and half. He's producing. Afterwards, he finds out that the market equilibrium price, which we will discuss later, the price he would get paid for producing rice increases from £1 to, let's say, £2. Now he's going to devote much more, if not all of his land, to producing rice, and zero of his land, none of his land, to producing wheat, because he's getting paid more money for producing rice. And assuming it's equally as hard / easy to produce rice and wheat, and assuming there's no other factors affecting his choices, say he enjoys farming them the same amount, then he would definitely farm more rice than wheat, as he's getting paid more money for it. And we've just drawn a supply schedule, and as I said before, This is very useful as we can plot these numbers in a graph. So we can plot these results in a graph. And this graph will show us our supply curve, which applies for many markets, a supply curve. So I'm just going to draw this a bit bigger. And though our dependent variable in this is our price, which usually goes on the x-axis, it's an economic convention to actually put the price on the y-axis. Just something you normally do in economics. So price in pence per litre. And this is quantity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this is price graph. And now we're going to plot these values quickly. So 50, that's 100, 87, 80 and 2, £1.10 and 3, 145 and 4, 5 and 190, and 6 and 250. So if we join these points together, we get a supply curve. This is our standard supply curve, which applies for many markets. And here we can see as the price increases, as the quantity demanded increases, the price is also increasing. And here as the quantity demanded decreases, it's when the price is also decreasing. Hence, as P increases, Q also increases. And here, unlike in demand, the line would reach the y-axis somewhere. This is because there is some, unlike in demand where there's a minimum quantity you need to have, in supply, there is some minimum price that you're not willing to produce anything below, because you'd be spending more than you're actually getting back. So this is why it does meet the x-axis. So we're back with our standard supply curve, with this being the the axis with price on it, and this being the axis with quantity on it, and the same with for all of these. Price, quantity, price, quantity, price, quantity. Now I just want to clarify why the supply curve is not linear and why it is actually slightly curved. Though it is similar to the demand curve, just the other way around, the reason for it being not linear, or usually not linear, is a bit different. So say, again, back with the example of the rice farmer. Say you're a rice farmer, and these resources are made for making rice. The resources that you have to use to produce up to this quantity is used for making either. And this one is definitely best for making wheat. So you don't need that much of a price increase to give you the incentive to produce more, as this is made for producing rice anyway, in this first section. However, in the second section, you need more of a price increase to give you the incentive to produce more of the rice over the wheat. But however, in the third section, you need even more, sometimes even this much of a steep incline. Because assuming this is definitely better for making wheat, you have to sacrifice a lot more hard work to turn this into a place where you can produce good rice, or just using the not so good land, you can actually produce good rice from that land. So you need a much bigger price incentive, as it's going to cost you much more effort, which is very valuable, time and effort. Okay? So now we have just, if you haven't seen the first part, we have just used an assumption called ceteris paribus, which means all other things equal. We looked at a standard demand curve with the assumption that only price and quantity can change, and all of the other factors that could change are currently equal. They're not changing while we're looking at price and quantity. But the truth is, they obviously are changing. But for the sake of this graph, we didn't look at the changing factors. But now what we're going to do is focus on those changing factors and see how they would affect our standard supply curve. So now we're going to look at affecting factors. And ceteris paribus meaning other things held equal. Also coming from words like etc. meaning and from Latin, and cetra meaning other things. Other things. So we're going to just list our affecting factors now. So this is expected future prices, and this is number of suppliers. This is price of key inputs. This is technological improvements. And this one here is other more profitable production options. Other more profitable production options. So now we're going to look at each of these individually. So we're starting with the expected future prices. So say for some reason, we can stick with the example of oil. Someone expects the oil prices to go up in the future. So they're going to supply as less as possible now, so that people can just... Let me start again. So they're going to supply as less as possible now, so they can save up their resources to produce more in the future. And the reason why they would do this is since they expect the prices to go up in the future, it would make more sense to them to produce more later on, as they would get more money from just the same amount of time and effort. So the current demand curve now we're looking at, current, C for current, at any given price point. So say even if they were getting charged, paid this much, right now they're producing, we can say 15, 16, but at any given price point, including this price point, they're going to produce less because they want to save more production resources for later. So now they're only going to produce 10. And we can look at this point as well. They'll probably produce maybe 5 less here, 6 less here. So instead of producing 10 like they were going to produce before, they're now producing 4. And here at this extremely high price, instead of producing the 25 that they were going to produce before, now they're only producing 19. Because they're saving more of their resources for later. 19. And so the whole supply curve shifts to the left of the graph. Shifts left on the graph. And now we can look at the future demand curve. Future, F for future. So now we've come to the point in time where suddenly they are right and oil prices have shot up. So now they want to produce as much as possible, as they don't know when they're going to get this opportunity again. So they're going to use all of their resources, or as much as they can, to just produce as much oil as they can to get more money from the same amount of time and effort than they were going to get before and might ever get again. They don't know that. But as for now, this is the point in time where they're going to get the most money for the same amount of work. So at any given price point, they have produced less in the past just so they can produce more now. So at any given price point, they're going to be producing more at any price point. So the whole thing will shift to the right, and the whole supply curve will shift to the right. And even the minimum price they're willing to supply at will lower as they have much more resources to supply from. So now we're moving on to the number of suppliers, and this is very intuitive one, not that hard. If there's more people supplying, then at any given price point there's going to be more of a quantity supplied as there are more people supplying, assuming that suddenly everyone else who is supplying just doesn't start producing less just because more people have entered, which does never happen, let me just tell you. So this will very rarely does happen. So this whole supply curve will shift to the right if there's more suppliers. However, if there's less people supplying, then there's going to be less quantity supplied at any given price point, less people in the market. So that whole supply curve will shift to the left. So now moving on to the price of key inputs. The price of key inputs. So a key input is something you need, is essential for you to produce your product. So say you're producing crisps and you need potatoes. If the potatoes were more expensive, they would only be able to produce less. At any given price point, they could only produce less because they just can't afford as many supplies. And the same amount of supplies is now more expensive. But say potatoes became slightly cheaper, so now they can produce slightly more, that the amount more that they can afford for the same money. At any given price point, they can produce slightly more. So now technological improvements or technological advancements. Say now there's some technology that makes producing crisps much easier. Let's say twice as easy. So with the same amount of money spent, they can produce twice as much. So the whole curve would shift massively to the right, and the minimum money they'd be willing to produce with would also decrease massively. There's never a technological regress. So now we're just looking at the last affecting factor with a bit more space. Other more profitable production options. So profitable production options. More profitable production options. So say before our supply curve looked something like this. Now, since we're getting more money for producing our other option, and we can go back to the example with rice and wheat. Say now we wanted to be a rice farmer because we thought the price was increasing, but the price is not increasing, and now, or even if it did, the wheat price has increased even more. So now we're going to get even more money for producing wheat. So now we're going to devote less of our land to producing rice and much more of our land to producing wheat as we're getting more money for it. We might just keep, the only reason we might keep a bit of rice production, like, continuing, is so we have a backup, or so we just, I don't know, we might just like producing rice. But the point is that if you're getting paid more for producing wheat, you produce less rice. So at any given price point, you would produce less quantity. There would be less quantity supplied, so the demand curve would shift to the left, and also the minimum price you'd be willing to supply with is higher. And vice versa, say there's wheat's price decreases, say it's just less profitable, even less profitable than it was before. Now you're producing even more rice than you were before. So if you want to better understand supply and demand, make sure you watch our first video, so this law of demand. demand, and my name is Ansh Jassra. So Ansh Jassra. And make sure you watch our next video where we combine the supply curve and the demand curve on one graph, and we look at the market equilibrium.